Good morning, everyone. We will open Commerce Committee. And gosh, Senator Ricciardi, you get the gavel to start, and I will allow you to open the hearing on Senate Bill 81, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Senate Commerce. We will start the hearing with Senate Bill 81, and we will listen to our chair, Senator Ennis, to introduce the bill.
81, and this might look familiar to those of you who were in the Senate last year, and it is. This has to do with affordable housing, and the objective of this particular bill is to increase the amount of funds that are coming out of the real estate transfer tax into the Affordable Housing Fund, and would increase that from $5 million annually to $10 million. It also provides for an additional appropriation of $25 million to be directed toward affordable housing. And I know it's going to be a tough budget year. However, this is a really important issue for our state and for our businesses. And for that reason, I think it makes sense to continue to try to push this through. The housing crisis, I think, is well known, and everybody hears about it. Just this morning on the radio driving in, there was a discussion about it with the Builders Association at the national level. And we hear this from real estate agents, we hear it from businesses and others. New Hampshire needs, we think, about 60,000 additional homes to really meet the needs of our state. The median home price is now above $500,000 and is approaching $600,000 for first-time home buyers. That creates an almost inaccessible housing cost. Rent has increased pretty substantially. Two-bedroom median gross rent for our statewide is $1,800, and it's past $2,000 a month in Grafton, Hillsborough, and Rockingham counties. So the people that businesses and our communities rely on, like teachers, childcare workers, law enforcement, retail workers, can no longer afford to live in many of our communities. And we saw this develop in the Seacoast some years ago. People working in Portsmouth couldn't afford to live there, so they moved west. And that's now happening all over the state and creating kind of an onerous situation for those who can even begin to afford a home. 86% of business leaders cite concerns about affordable housing as their number one public issue, Since we've created the Affordable Housing Fund, we've supported 119 developments so far with 3,500 units of rental housing. And in just the last 5 years, the fund supported 26 projects and 1,678 units. So this is a good thing. This bill provides a much needed immediate one-time appropriation. And importantly, it also provides ongoing predictability from the real estate transfer tax allocation. And I was talking with with Bob Quinn from the Realtors Association just this morning, and he was telling me that, and you can see this in the number, he reminded me that our revenue in this transfer tax is holding up pretty nicely because while sales are down, values have gone up significantly. So this will not, really have a detrimental impact on that fund. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I know there are many who will be following me to discuss this bill as well.
Any questions for members of the committee?
Okay,
Seeing none, thank you for your introduction. The chair will now call Nate Grays. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nate Grays with the Business and Industry Association, the state's statewide Chamber of Commerce. We also support this legislation. As Senator Ennis pointed out, the vast majority of business leaders across the state have identified housing as the number one issue for the state to tackle. It's the number one constraint on business expansion at this point in time, and also attracting new workers as well as increasing that talent pool. Specifically to the Affordable Housing Fund, this is really the best use of public investment into housing. As Senator Ennis pointed out, and I'm sure that Rob DePriest will point out shortly, the number of units compared to the investment has been significant, and it really targets a specific income demographic that we do need to pay attention to, that we do struggle with attracting additional housing units that are within their price bracket. So this will be critical to help filling that gap. Happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. All right. It looks like we have Chris Norwood from the Realtors. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak, members of the committee. My name is Chris Norwood, and I am the 2025 Vice Chair of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors Public Policy Committee, speaking here on behalf of our 7,000 or so members. I also would just like to offer in full disclosure, I am also on the board of New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, the organization which helps administer the affordable housing funds. So I just wanted to speak in favor, on behalf of the Realtors, in favor of this bill. I'm not going to get into a lot of what has been said, but other than saying these are funds that are desperately needed, I can say from my various hats that I wear, there was a lot of federal stimulus that has been going through the pipeline in the last 5 years, and that federal stimulus is no longer with us. And this affordable housing fund is really a complement for developers. And this is also something to say that we know that these funds take a long time to go through the pipeline. So we're not going to see the results of this in 2025, but I think we will all see it in years to come. The last thing I'll just let you know that as for the Realtors, it's already been said, we do not see a declining real estate transfer tax for 2025 as the volumes are going up. We also want to note that this is holding the real estate transfer tax rate the same, which is very important to the Realtors. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right, from New Hampshire Housing, we have Rob. So please come join us this morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Rob Dappas, Executive Director of New Hampshire Housing, and what you're receiving are two handouts, one which includes a letter that we've written in support of Senate Bill 81, a fact sheet about the Affordable Housing Fund, and something that we haven't done in the past, but one pager which lists some of the eligible projects for which we've received applications and determined them to be eligible and have been unable to make commitments to finance them as of yet because all of our resources are fully committed. Before I get to that, I think, Mr. Chair, you framed the situation very well with respect to New Hampshire and our housing crisis. I just want to provide some basic information about the Affordable Housing Fund, about New Hampshire Housing, and how we use that resource. For those who may not be familiar with New Hampshire Housing, we're a self-supporting public corporation with a mission to promote, finance, and support housing solutions for the people of New Hampshire. Created by state law, we run a range of programs that help advance that mission, including we've financed and helped created over 15,000 affordable apartment homes across the state, offering loans through partner banks and lenders to help New Hampshire families achieve homeownership, and administering the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 program for much of the state. We don't receive any operating funds from the state. We are not a state agency or state employees. The same state law that created New Hampshire Housing in 1981 was later used to establish the Affordable Housing Fund, with New Hampshire Housing as its steward and administrator. So we administer these funds. And since then, it has functioned as a revolving loan fund and an essential tool for the creation of workforce housing, affordable housing, and supportive housing across the state, and a key tool to help us leverage federal and private investments. So you can see from that Affordable Housing Fund fact sheet that we handed out that in the past two biennial budgets, the governor and legislature have seen fit, and thank you all for your work in making this happen, to make historic investments in the Affordable Housing Fund, and that has made projects possible, which are in the process of creating jobs in New Hampshire and improving neighborhoods and helping to improve health outcomes, workforce availability, decreasing homelessness and housing instability across the state. We make Affordable Housing Fund money available through two basic channels, through our allocation of federal housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds. We use the Affordable Housing Fund in combination with those federal resources. Again, those tax credits bring private investment to bear. And so as you can see from the representative projects on that one-page handout, we achieve leveraging of typically four or five, sometimes much higher federal and private dollars for every state dollar that is invested in one of these projects. And those are that tax exempt bond and low income housing tax credit allocation is generally resources that would not otherwise go used. And in some cases, those developments would happen as market rate, but very often they wouldn't happen at all, and they would be stalled. And in particular, in this case, these are projects where developers have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in permitting, construction estimates, things like that, to get these projects ready and in the pipeline. The other channel that we use to allocate Affordable Housing Fund money is through our supportive housing program. The Affordable Housing Fund has fewer strings attached than federal dollars, and so we're able to make possible housing for people with substance use disorders, with intellectual and developmental disabilities, with severe mental illness, and other special needs that we really can't do with the federal dollars because of various federal strings that are attached. And so it's been really essential to our work in creating housing for those particular populations. All the properties that are financed with LIHTC, with the federal tax credits, are affordable for 30 to 60 and sometimes 99 years. By law, everything that we finance with the Affordable Housing Fund must be affordable for at least 20 years. 30 years is a much more common restriction because we incentivize that longer affordability period. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but once again, thank you for taking up this issue and for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Dapis. Any questions? All right, appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Right, and it looks like the last person signed up to speak on this bill is Nick Taylor from New Hampshire Housing Action. Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Nick Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide advocacy organization that advocates for pro-housing policies. Our members include developers, lenders, property managers, homeless shelters, and more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill forward. This is a top priority for Housing Action this session. I think that the need has been demonstrated here from previous speakers, but we have under 1% rental vacancy rate, and median rents are at all-time highs, making it unaffordable for many members of our community. You know, we know this will be a tough budget year, but this is the exact type of investment that we need to do. When we're in tough situations, it also leverages private dollars to make projects happen. As Rob just mentioned, it has leveraged over $500 million throughout its history here. And so that is a great investment at a time when we have to be really careful about where every dollar gets spent this session. This allows for predictability for developers so they can plan, so they can use this fund in the long term. And along with zoning and permitting reform, we think this is a great package for addressing one of the top issues facing the state. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor? All right, seeing none, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 81? Please.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Rebecca Skye. I'm the Executive Director for the New Hampshire State Commission on Aging. The Commission on Aging was created during the 2019 legislative session in response to the permanent transformational demographic shift that our state is undergoing. Our key charge is to advise the Governor and General Court on issues related to aging. And to that end, I want to express the Commission's support of HB 81, or SB 81, apologies. And its focus on affordable housing. I'm just going to very quickly give you a few stats about our older adults in the state that really support the need for more affordable housing in our state. Older adults living on fixed incomes, relying heavily on Social Security, are often priced out of housing at rates higher than the general population. New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute has good data on the increased rates of poverty amongst older adults. They look at the supplemental poverty measure, a measure created by the Census Bureau. And for Granite Cedars age 65 and over, it was 14%, whereas the supplemental poverty rate for those 18 to 64 was 8.4%. Those with mobility issues face added hurdles in finding housing. The Census Bureau in an October 2023 report found that less than 20% of housing stock in New England is age ready. That is having a no barrier entry and a bed and bath on the first floor. Jumping down in my testimony, the availability and affordability of housing is a priority concern for the Commission on Aging, not only because of its impact on older adults with fixed incomes, but also its effect on the direct care workers who provide services older adults for older adults and who have whose wages are low. These caregivers deliver critical services in our homes and in our nursing homes. And on the back of the testimony that I'll give you in a moment, there's two graphs. Pictures speak 1,000 words. One is looking at the cost burden for age 65 plus here in New Hampshire by regions, and the second is looking at incomes of older adults and showing how they decline over time. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, appreciate it very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 81? All right, seeing none, there were 5 additional folks who signed up in support but chose not to speak. And I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 81. All right, you're going to be next.
Time is it?
It is time. Yes. So I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 82, which is our esteemed Vice Chair, Senator Ricciardi's bill. She will present it to us. Good morning again, Senator.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Denise Ricciardi, the State Senator for District 9. Good morning to my fellow committee members. I am very pleased to introduce Senate Bill 82, known as the HOPE Act. For your consideration, the Housing Opportunity Project Extension Act is a forward-thinking initiative that seeks to establish partnerships with New Hampshire municipalities to create attainable housing opportunities by utilizing unused town or state land. Today, I'm introducing a replacement bill that would focus specifically on state-owned land. It would direct state agencies to identify and submit to the governor and executive council a list of unused parcels of land that could be repurposed for workforce housing. Under this proposal, the state of New Hampshire would transfer eligible parcels of land to towns at no cost, provided that the land is used for housing development within a specified time frame. To ensure these homes remain accessible, eligibility would be tied to income caps based on the state's median income. The bill also includes a $20 million grant program to support municipalities in developing the necessary infrastructure, helping to keep housing costs affordable for residents. There are 3 key benefits worth highlighting in this legislation. Number 1, this program addresses the urgent need for housing for our workforce. Number 2, through deed restrictions, these units will be owner occupied, preventing them from being converted into rental properties. Number 3, since municipalities act as developers under this program, any profits from the sale of homes or projects would be directed toward reducing property taxes. While this may not be a perfect plan, it's an important and necessary step in addressing New Hampshire's housing. This proposal is the result of collaboration with the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, and I'm pretty confident that Matt Mayberry can answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Senator. We appreciate the introduction. Thank you.
Okay?
All right. All right, so Mr. Mayberry, you heard your introduction. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning.
There we go. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I realized this morning that we're going to be spending so much time together, we may have to start celebrating anniversaries, birthdays, pet
Yes.
adoptions.
Going to get there.
Exactly. And I'll bring cupcakes. But I'm Matt Mayberry. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. We represent the 27,000 people who work in the residential building trades. The home building industry is a $5.4 billion contributor to our state's economy. We're also, as you folks are, at the epicenter of the housing challenge we're facing here in our state. We want to work collaboratively to resolve this issue. I'm here today in very strong support of the HOPE Act because this has lived in my head for a long time. So we're excited. I want to especially thank Senator Ricciardi and Chairman Ennis and Senator Pearl for bringing forward a bold and dynamic initiative to this body. The HOPE Act is designed to help law enforcement, firefighters, nurses, teachers, and members of the National Guard to live in communities that they serve. We received a great suggestion of working with an already existing program within the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority to assist these homeland heroes with a $5,000 closing cost assistance. The HOPE Act provides opportunities for hardworking families making the state median income of $96,000, an opportunity to have a home of their own. Yes, the lots will be small. There won't be a ton of storage, but it's theirs. They can build financial equity, they can build generational wealth, but most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, they can form a neighborhood. Because by deed restriction, these homes must be owner-occupied and can only be sold to other owner-occupiers. They can't be flipped into a rental, and they can't be turned into a short-term rental that's currently eating up our long-term rental markets. There will be no age restrictions. Children will be welcomed, and there's no career or occupational criteria. This is open to every Granite Stater who can afford the mortgage. These will be taxed at full market rates once online. Please remember that for every 100 homes built in New Hampshire, it creates 297 full-time jobs, $80 million in immediate economic activity, and $3.4 million annual in long-term economic activity and tax revenue. We are asking the state of New Hampshire to be a partner in this bold initiative. The state shall identify state-owned parcels that are suited for residential development and transfer those lands to the town in which they reside in on the assurance that housing shall be provided in a short window of time. Much like the Let's Get Building Act, this is a go and build, not a grab and hold. I've already been approached by a perfect parcel in Grafton County that fits this criteria. It's slightly flawed, but has huge potential. The town has been trying for 16 years to get NHDOT to release the land. And finally, Governor Sununu was able to get the ruined buildings torn down recently. I do want to be very, very clear on this, because the rumors have already started from the naysayers and those who want the status quo. The HOPE Act was not and is not designed for the aforementioned parcel. I was talking with a state representative who told me the story about this parcel. Red tape moves slowly and chokes initiative, and lots of folks hate change. This is change. So let's get that change going today. The funds for the infrastructure will come from the general fund. We can talk about which agency could best administer these grants, but this could provide property tax relief from the sale of the project or homes if they show a substantial profit. The towns can't bank the proceeds. It must be utilized to help others stay in their homes longer and reduce their property tax burdens. When I appeared before you last week, I promised that conquering this housing challenge will take several bold initiatives combined. Not one will solve this problem. It's kind of like your hand. One finger can do a lot, but when you start adding other initiatives for fingers, it forms a mighty fist that can crush this challenge that we're facing. We want to work collaboratively. We want to be a good and active partner on it. But most importantly, we want to get the housing to those who need it the most. And right now, Senator, that would be everyone. I know you have questions, so
All right.
let's
Are there
go.
questions of Mr. Mayberry? All right, Senator Finn.
Thank you for taking my questions. I couldn't agree more that we need affordable housing in every aspect. My fear, though, and my questions revolve around the fiscal impact It even says here in the bill, this bill does not provide funding, nor does it authorize new positions. This is a ton of money we're talking about with little guidance on it. Can you comment on that part?
Yes, sir. It's designed so that no more than, rearrange this, each county cannot receive more than $5 million towards infrastructure grants. It'd be used towards roads, water, septic, or connecting to a sewer. It's designed that way so at least 4 different counties in the state of New Hampshire could each receive up to $5 million. Towns can work together. If you have 2 adjoining towns, and the parcel's in the middle, they can come together, pool it for $2 million. But each county is capped at receiving $5 million. But also I want to reference back to that for every 100 homes that are built, it creates $80 million of economic activity. That's a 4-to-1 ratio of return. Not bad.
Okay.
And then also, Senator, it would be taxed at the full market rate once it comes online.
Follow up.
Thank you again for taking my question. Again, I'm scared about it does not provide a funding source. And the bill even reads, the bill fails to identify a funding source or appropriate funds for designated department to manage the program.
Yes, sir. And that's why in my testimony, I said that these would come from the general fund and that we'd work with the committee and with the Senate and the legislature on identifying the best avenue in which this should be administered, be that the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, be it the Business Finance Authority, be it the BEA. That's why I mentioned we want to work collaboratively on this, because I don't have all the answers on day one, but collectively we can develop the strongest answers.
Good for, thank you.
All right. Any others? All right. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right. Next up, we have Brody DeShade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for letting me speak this morning. My name is Brody DeShays. I'm one of the legislative advocates with the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit, voluntary membership organization with every municipality in the state of New Hampshire being a member voluntarily. We have not seen the current draft of Senator Ricciardi's bill. We are neutral to the bill, though. We just had some technical points to opine to the committee. And I'll speak to the underlying bill because some of these issues may persist in the current draft of the bill. And then I'll answer any questions. But, I might not have a lot of answers because we haven't had our team or our legal counsel review the current draft of the bill. But we'd always be happy for any of the senators to share the current draft with us, or Senator Ricciardi to share it with us, and we can work through any technical issues we see from our end, the municipality's end. The bill underlying, so the original draft, seemed like enabling legislation, but there was no adoption process explained, whether it's a governing body that adopts it or the legislative body. And that's something where we don't have an adoption process, municipalities are less likely to want to participate in programs. So ensuring that there's an adoption process, whether how the state will share the land that the legislative body or the governing body is voting to accept it, or it's clear who's responsible for accepting that land, that's important to our municipalities. So there isn't gray area over who's responsible for accepting it and basically disposing and working with others of how this land will be utilized as accordance to statute. We also wanted to point out that 1/10 of an acre is extremely small for our current standards in the state, especially if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, or if you don't have the proper soil or land that could support septic systems for these units. So that's something we really wanted to point out, that while this would be enabling legislation, a lot of communities may kind of balk at such small plots of land. And also, we noticed that reserve land isn't well defined in your current draft. Reserve land, the definition might have changed, but in the underlying bill that we have a copy of, reserve land is not defined. So our concern from the municipality's point of view was, what is reserve land, right? So, or a county, an example that I use with our team is Carroll County owns about 660 acres worth of land. What if that land would be considered reserve? Is it all 660 acres? Is it some? Is it that can be developed? Some of it is prime ag land. Would that be exempt? Reserve is very open-ended, so we wouldn't know how to interpret that in statute. So those were kind of our technical things we wanted to raise. Again, we're neutral to the bill. We understand that that we want to incentivize communities to build housing, and local control usually is the best way for communities to meet their residents' needs and or municipalities, I should say. So I'll answer any questions if the committee has any, and I'll try to answer to the best of my ability without the current draft of the bill in front of me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
For being here. And it looks like the final person signed up to speak is Jim Michaud from Hudson, New Hampshire. Good morning.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Jim Michaud. I'm the town assessor for the town of Hudson. I'm officially neutral on this bill. My Hudson Board of Selectmen have not weighed in pro or con. But I frequently, when I look at these bills, I look at the administrative and technical aspects. And I was initially going to only comment on one area, but the more I read, the more I have a question. Lines 6 through 8 on page 1 talks about reserve or land suitable for rezoning. So is it disallow tax deeded property from being used for this? Because tax deeded property is really problematic once you sell it. There was a Supreme Court decision that basically said all of the monies after expenses had to go back to the original owners of the property. And if you don't know who they are, you have to go through interpleader. So there is a House bill that does something similar to this, and it talks about that you can't use tax deeded property for this purpose. So that might be problematic. I don't see that this is means tested. Maybe there's another part to this statute that I don't know that plays into this. So if it is, then that's great. Beyond that, line 8 says for community members to live where they work. I don't see any requirement that this is the people living in these properties are required to work in that community. Kind of immaterial. When we get to lines 22 through 26, it says that the municipality should be responsible for verifying home ownership every 2 years. I say, why 2 years? Why not every year, right? Because there's many areas in which we administer, say, credits and exemptions and residence commercial industrial zone where it's every year. So that's a question. And the other question is, if the municipality is going to sell this off to a developer, is this home ownership requirement verification pass on to the developer? Because that's not clear in the bill that that would pass. Lastly, on lines 16 to 17 on page 2, parcels exceeding the 10-acre threshold shall be exempt from current use taxes. So current use taxes, I think it means land use change tax. And I just want to make sure the correct language is being used. But beyond that, so if a community participates, then they have to accept that if it's 10 acres or more, that they're going to not receive current use monies. Many of our communities use their land use change tax monies to go into conservation funds. It's local choice, so they know it going in, and I understand that. It's just that we've seen some other current use bills that would take current use money and exempt it, and there's been some hue and cry on some of those. So I'm not sure if folks saw that one or not. And other than that, that's my only comment.
Okay, all right.
I'll take any questions.
Questions? Senator McGill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Michaud, for coming here on behalf of the people of Hudson today. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what brought you here for Hudson today. And specifically, I'm curious what you think about the line on page 1, line 24 and 25, how municipalities would take on the responsibility of verifying home ownership every 2 years.
Thank you for the question, Senator. As the assessor in the community, bills that are going to impact how we're assessing property, what our responsibilities are, specifically to the lines you talked about, who's going to be responsible at that local level to verify home ownership. The assessing offices, we receive deeds from the registry, so we can certainly check a deed. But in terms of checking whether or not they still reside there, like a residency requirement, there's no form on here for them to fill out to verify. So I'm kind of wondering myself, how does that work? So it's the same from community to community, if I understand your question.
All right. Any others? All right. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 82? All right. There were 4 folks signed up in support who did not speak. And with that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 82, and in a moment, we will open up our next hearing. Yeah, and that, it is the Senator Murphy show from here on out. Thank you. Gives you that one. All right. We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 78, an act relative to the zoning board adjustments appeal period. And I wish Senator Murphy a good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Senator Murphy, representing the people of District 16. I have a lot to say about housing, and I'd like to save the meat and potatoes of that for the next bill.
Okay.
This bill simply standardizes what is currently the practice among most towns for ZBA zoning board appeals at 30 days statewide. Most communities already have a 30-day requirement. Some communities take advantage of the flexibility provided by the current RSA for a, quote, reasonable time, unquote. Clearly subjective. Some communities stretch it out. One of the issues with housing and building in general in this state is a wide variety of differences from town to town. So this sort of, in one little way, makes things a little bit consistent from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I ask you to kindly upon the bill. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
All right. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the introduction. All right, we have Chris Norwood from the Realtors here to testify. Good morning again.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on the bill today. Again, my name is Chris Norwood. I'm the 2025 Vice Chair of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors and their 7,000 members. We come today speaking in favor of this legislation and would ask you to support it. A little bit of context behind the comments of the bill's sponsor. More or less state standard is a 30-day appeal period for planning and zoning decisions. So this is codified both in case law and in a lot of various zoning ordinances. What is less clear are other administrative appeals, specifically building permit appeals for construction of a permit for housing or really any other construction. Some municipalities, like where my office is in Bedford, New Hampshire, has it in their ordinance as 30 days. Amherst, the town I grew up in, has the definition of reasonable, which is outlined in RSA 674-33. This bill will codify that 30-day appeal period to standardize the time in which an aggrieved party can appeal a building permit. So just some history behind this and why we feel it's so important. The history behind this is you have to go back into the 90s for a Supreme Court case which delayed some construction up to 2 years while litigation was taking place because an aggrieved party appealed a building permit after 55 days. And while eventually the owner of the property prevailed and the Supreme Court said, yeah, 55 days was unreasonable, that was a 2-year period of a lot of angst, I can assume, for that individual. And why is it important today? It's important today because I can tell with personal experience of buyers I have who want to put up housing units, they simply say, I cannot deal with the word reasonable. Mm-hmm. It's too vague, and I don't want to have to go into the ZBA office armed with my attorney because I just don't think that that is reasonable. And so I come today in support of this bill in hopes for some standardization across the state to simply put notification on a level playing field so that there can be some certainty in the market for all parties. And with that, I'll entertain any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you very
your
much, Mr.
testimony.
Chair.
All right, Mr. Deshay, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. My name is Brody Deshays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 78. Reason is because it gets rid of the appeals process flexibility, which would hurt ZBAs and abutters during the process. You notice in line 3, the bill, it says in abutter as defined by RSA 672:3. There are often times when ZBAs want to allow some flexibility or additional time for folks who are summer residents. We have a lot of snowbirds in the state of New Hampshire. Sometimes they like to extend that deadline so then those abutters can know about the changes to a property or the different things that are happening during the zoning process, and they may want to appeal a decision, or they may want to, be able to attend a public hearing during the appeals process. 30 days doesn't allow, by mandating that on one community, it doesn't allow communities to use their discretion to determine what's the best process for them, what's the best process for meeting the need of all of their residents. And so with that, that is why we're opposed, and I'll answer any questions.
Okay. All right, we have some questions. I'll start with Senator Rishardi.
Thank you for your comments. My question is, how would you then, the word reasonable is subjective. I can absolutely see why that is a problem. It's a convoluted term. How would you rectify that then with still keeping in mind the snowbirds and the zoning? Do you have a suggestion on?
My recommendation would be education to local ZBAs, which the municipal association provides. So making sure that the ordinances they have in place are reasonable, and it's also on residents of the community who might be interested in additional, whether it's development or planning and zoning that's done locally, to educate their ZBAs and say, maybe it's best for it not to be always so open-ended, but maybe have some additional criteria. But there are some times in smaller communities where it can be difficult to form a quorum of the board, that allowing that open-ended reasonable is the most reasonable thing for that community to do. So if you think of a small town, 300 or 400 people that has a planning and zoning board, it can be tough to form a quorum and to get everyone to be able to get to the meeting, especially when we consider summer residents who that may volunteer on those boards, or not summer residents, full-time residents, but that spend some time at a state. So it's one of those things where it's kind of tough to mandate from on high a perfect solution. And that's why usually it's best for municipalities to tailor the best solution to their municipality and their residents.
Thank you.
All right, Senator McGue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. So in your mind, what's reasonable, and when does a reasonable period of time become unreasonable? Give me a number.
Well, it's really dependent on the municipality. It's really dependent on the case. It's really dependent on how long it takes them to find the facts during the appeals process. So I think that's part of the issue with the bill, is trying to find that perfect number. It's really dependent. In my town of Wolfboro, there's an ordinance for what that number is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's what's been determined by our ZBA and what's tended to work for our municipality. And some, you can probably run hard and fast with a number, depending on how much support you have from a planning department and a code enforcement officer. And in other communities, they don't always have that support. Maybe they're dependent on a circuit rider, and that circuit rider isn't going to be able to provide them any advice until later in the month. So, that's part of the issue with having a hard and fast number. So I couldn't say definitively what the best number is for any community. That's for the ZBAs to decide.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But isn't that exactly why we need a number? Because reasonableness is dependent upon the conduct of the parties, the complexity and the nature of the case, and the underlying intent of the parties. And that's why it makes it difficult to plan a business or plan a development or plan a project. I mean, isn't that difficulty and that vagueness of the term, isn't that exactly why we need it? Wouldn't that be helpful to your constituents?
Thank you, Senator. In some communities, it definitely wouldn't be. Without that flexibility, without the ability to be able to meet the needs of their residents and the board and how they govern and the support that they have in their planning department. Not every community is like some of the communities in the southern part of the state that might have a specific number of days in their ordinance. Some communities really do need that flexibility so they can do the process properly and make sure that the property owners and the abutters and the residents of the community all have their fair shake.
Senator Fett.
Brody, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator.
Yeah, totally get your position on this, and I understand that, concerns from my other senator, my colleagues as well. The 30 days, what about if there was language in here saying, to appeal an appeal for a little bit, an extension of time? If they think that the 30 days isn't enough, say, hey, can I get 60 because I snowboard and I go to Florida? Would you be supportive of something like that?
Well, I mean, I would imagine any language that you would propose wouldn't allow the ZBA to extend its own deadline. And sometimes there's a case where a ZBA needs to because they might not be able to form a quorum. They might not have, again, I mentioned, sometimes communities share the same planner, in a circuit. And so maybe that planner isn't going to be around for 15 or 21 days. So again, that's part of the issue with setting a hard and fast number is it doesn't consider the flexibility that municipalities need and that ZBAs need to be able to do this process properly and based on their existing ordinances and the expectations of their residents who have lived and dealt with their ZBAs and their planning boards and how they operate for decades. So I mean, if you have any language, we'd be happy to review it, but I'm unsure if any kind of set, number is going to be able to meet the needs of municipalities and their residents and the ZBAs that need to deal with these issues.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you, Senators.
it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 78? All right, seeing none, I would note that there are 4 folks who signed up but chose not to speak and all were in support. I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 78. Senator Murphy, you're going to be up again in a moment with Senate Bill 84. He's already up there. He's got it. Sure, and then go to that group. I hear you. Why can't you? Yeah. You're not wrong. Right, exactly. All right, thank you. All right, let's open the hearing on Senate Bill 84 and we'll re-welcome Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Murphy, representing the people of District 16. Mr. Chairman, I typically have pretty short introductions. I think that's pretty common. Today, for the first, and I promise only time, I will go long on this topic. I want to explain the basis for my opinions. My family has been in the construction trades for generations. So many generations that my mother's family name is Zimmerman, which is German for carpenter. I grew up in learning how to solder copper pipe and run Romex or on Ethernet cable. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I earned a master's degree in community planning. So I have relevant experience to this issue from both the practical and regulatory perspectives. There is a dire housing shortage in our state. We know this because our median price has recently crossed $500,000. It's the 9th highest in the United States. The average house here costs 26% more than in Vermont, 21% more than in Maine. Prices are set by supply and demand, and we have not allowed builders to meet the demand, resulting in those higher prices. The last 5 years, the median single-family home price has risen 69% in Merrimack County, 64% in Hillsborough, 90% in Sullivan, 77% in Grafton, and so on. And before I talk about why this happened and how it happened, I want to talk for a moment about what this shortage has meant. Our employers can't find enough workers because the workers can't afford to find housing. Our local chambers of commerce hear this continually from their members. As a small business owner myself, I can state without hesitation that I routinely hear my employees say they can't find apartments in their price range. Out-of-state businesses pass by New Hampshire because of the high housing costs here. Smith & Wesson, and I passed out a recent press release. Smith & Wesson recently moved from Springfield, Massachusetts to Tennessee after Massachusetts passed anti-firearm legislation. Why did they move 750 jobs to Tennessee when there is a very firearm-friendly state right next door? The press release specifically cites the cost of living and affordability and the availability of qualified labor they found there. Make no mistake, we are missing out on jobs and opportunity because of our anti-housing policies. We have the second highest median age in the nation, partly because our young people can't find starter homes. Those 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet homes that young families need to buy just don't exist because they've been regulated out of existence. Those young families have moved to where they can afford to live a higher quality of life and begin to build wealth through real estate. Property taxes continue to rise for many reasons, but one of those reasons is that development has been stifled. By making it harder for people to build, we have kept the total property values in each town lower than they would be if building were welcomed. The tax burden is spread among fewer homes than would otherwise be the case. Local budgets have continued to grow even as building permits have dried up, and our residents are screaming for property tax relief. And most importantly, perhaps, those higher housing costs also mean higher rents, which increases homelessness for those who can't afford rent and takes disposable income from those who can only afford rent after a struggle. Every extra penny our citizens must put towards housing is a penny less that could have been put towards other necessities such as food, medicines, clothing, or saved. So what has caused this situation? In a nutshell, our state and many of the towns in it have discouraged new housing construction, sometimes intentionally and sometimes incidentally. Our state has absurdly complicated, tedious, redundant, and expensive permits required for altering terrain or obtaining driveway access from state roads. These permits can sometimes take years to be granted, and the attitude from agencies is often too bad. It is what it is. The general sense at both the state and local level is that builders have to kiss the ring to get the permits, and if it takes a year or two, that's what it is. But while the lack of urgency from state agencies is definitely part of the problem, it pales, in my opinion, next to the outright intentional obstructionism posed by many town planning offices and boards. I want to be clear that this does not apply to all towns. Several communities in the southern tier have welcomed housing. One great example is Salem, which benefited from having a huge parcel sitting there ready to build and town leadership willing to think big about what to put there. And it's no coincidence that 2 weeks ago, Analogic announced it's moving 500 high-paying jobs to Salem from Massachusetts. But we don't have enough Salems. Most communities in southern New Hampshire have used every trick under the sun to discourage building, especially those starter homes we so badly need. What you need to understand is that every single inspection, every hearing, every permit, every redraft, every appeal, every impact fee, every meeting, every single penny a builder needs to put towards a project must be recouped through the sale of the property. If the process of getting building permits stretches for months or years, if the planning board sends the project back for edits again and again, if the builder needs to hire a lawyer to fight an unfair denial, if the town demands granite curbs and fire cisterns and impact fees, all of those costs add up until either the project no longer pencils out or it only pencils out with $1 million house. And that's why we are where we are. Of all the costs stopping builders from building the housing we need, and there are many, the single biggest, in my opinion, is unreasonably large lot size minimums. These lot size requirements were supposedly put in place initially to ensure that lot soils have the ability to absorb effluents and produce enough clean well water. But they have become the single biggest tool in the planner's toolbox to force builders to only build mansions and keep out new neighbors. Let's take a community with a hypothetical 3-acre minimum lot size. If that builder were allowed to build half-acre lots, those 3 acres could fit 6 homes. Suddenly, with 6 homes, the builder can build smaller, more cost-effective homes by achieving an economy of scale. He can order his material and arrange his subcontractors so they can work on those 6 homes efficiently. And there's the cost savings. But with a 3-acre lot minimum, the builder can only build 1 home. And in order for him to make any profit on the home after he sells it, it's going to be a big, expensive home, which I'm afraid is completely intended on the part of the local planning officials. Remember, the planning boards are elected and usually have little or no experience in either building or planning. They are political creatures just as we are, and they respond to their constituents. And while many constituents are screaming for more affordable housing and lower tax bills, some communities are more concerned about keeping out others. And planners have a trade name for these regulations. They call it snob zoning. 2 weeks ago, I attended a meeting on this topic in a neighboring town, and I was told by one lady that we need to keep Manchester in Manchester. And I have heard that statement repeatedly over the years. Let me tell you what I hear when I listen to that statement. I hear someone who moved to town 10 or 20 years ago, and now she has hers. She wants to deny others that opportunity. She doesn't want to live near the people who cook her food at her local restaurants, or the people who teach her kids, or build her house, or staff a local fire station. She pretends that her property rights extend past her property line, that she has the right to tell others what they build and who can live there. Having gotten her piece of property a few years ago, she now feels entitled to slam the door behind her. She might disguise this ugly sentiment with some nonsense about how she cares about the environment and wants to always see that meadow across the street. But her house went up on a meadow pretty recently too. And higher densities are actually better for the environment because more people living here means more space left undeveloped over there. The truth is, she thinks smaller houses might affect her property values, and she doesn't want to have to see them. A healthy community has room for all classes, for professionals from all backgrounds and incomes. Excluding some on the basis of their station of life or their profession means excluding the teachers, firefighters, nurses, and yes, wait staff and line cooks that work for me, that serve all of us every time that people venture out of their homes and into the community. If you hear this appeal for keeping huge lot sizes, please see it for what it is, an appeal for excluding others by only allowing 5-bedroom, 3-bath, million-dollar homes. And I ask you to reject it. This is not a left or right issue. I personally see this as an issue dealing with free markets, being allowed to meet demand, and as a property rights issue. But others might see it as a way to better integrate communities economically and providing more affordable housing, and both viewpoints are accurate. Most of my bills dealing with housing address it with tweaks, working around the edges, and those are important, and together they will make a difference. But make no mistake, Senate Bill 84 is the single most impactful bill to come before your committee this year. By setting a maximum minimum lot size requirement of 1.5 acre, it will allow greater density for building homes, driving down the cost of building more than anything else we could do. If we are serious about addressing this problem, and we should be, this is the bill to do it. Everything else, including my other bills, are really window dressing by comparison. Senate Bill 84 sets a maximum lot size that towns can require. For lots not served by public water or sewer, that size is about 1.5 acres. Lots served by public water would have a maximum requirement of 1 acre, and lots served by both public water and sewer would have a maximum requirement of about 1/2 acre. Buyers could still buy and maintain lots of any size. Builders could better fit appropriately sized houses on each lot, and smaller 1.5 lots would be interspersed among larger ones. For the sake of reference, the current zoning regulation in Bedford allows for a minimum lot size of 1.5 acres. So Senate Bill 84 would change very little there, except for a small area served by public water. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the patience shown by the committee. In conclusion, we have an army of skilled craftsmen in this state, led by qualified builders. They are begging to be allowed to build the homes we desperately need, and all we need to do is take off the handcuffs. Senate Bill 84 is a big part of doing that, and I ask for your support for the bill. I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Are there questions? I think you covered it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a number of people signed up to speak on this bill. I'm going to ask that you keep your comments concise and on point. If you're submitting written testimony, please do not repeat that when you're testifying. So let's jump right into it. We have Chris Norwood from the Realtors back with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm not going to repeat any of the, I should introduce myself yet again for the record. My name is Chris Norwood, Vice Chair of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors Public Policy Committee for 2025. I'm not going to repeat myself in terms of all of the statistics around the housing crisis we find ourselves in. I just wanted to go back a little bit in terms of this concept of 2-acre zoning, which is kind of the most common amongst our state. If you look into most of our zoning ordinances, you'll see 2-acre zoning. And the reason why that really came about was, now 30, 40 years ago in the 80s when we were having that unprecedented boom, we found ourselves looking at what's the geometry with the technology at the time to put a septic system, a leach field, a long driveway, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you need a backup leach in there as well. And it turns out that was kind of the geometry for the technology at the time. And this concept of 2-acre zoning was kind of wedded into our system. And it was wedded into our system not only for locations that had private water and sewer, but also kind of leached in, no pun intended, into areas where we have municipal water and sewer, where those geometry issues just aren't in play. And as the sponsor said, this bill would be very powerful in terms of increasing density. And specifically, if you look to Roman numerals 2 on line 9 and Roman numeral 3 on line 13, where we have municipal infrastructure such as water and sewer, where there's already availability for excess capacity and density. And so I would submit to you that, our zoning ordinances statewide, not every town, but broadly speaking, there are a lot of zoning ordinances that are kind of stuck in the 1980s and their concept of 2-acre zoning, irregardless of whether you have municipal water or sewer. And I think that this bill updates us into what really the goals of RSA 674-16 are, which is the granting of power to the municipality for the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. And I would add the community is not just the town that it resides in. It's the community, as defined by a Supreme Court case, is the community broadly speaking, the neighboring towns as well. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dapis, from New Hampshire Housing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. And Senator Murphy, I will, again, I'm Rob Dapis, Executive Director of New Hampshire Housing. We are strongly in favor of this bill. I won't repeat many of the arguments that Senator Murphy framed extraordinarily well, I think, in his comments, but I'll just say, I spoke a few minutes ago about the importance of publicly financed and affordable housing, and this bill may not make a big difference for most of the projects we finance, and that is okay. I think as Matt put it, with a fist, this is also a very important piece of the puzzle, and there's never going to be enough public financing to solve the housing problem that we're in, nor should there be. We need to lower barriers to allow the market to respond to the need. I take part in a lot of conversations around housing around the state, and far too often I hear people blaming builders and saying that they should build the starter homes that were more common in the 70s and 80s, exactly the kind of starter home that my family moved to 12 years ago when we came to New Hampshire. Those of us in the industry see that builders do not have the choice to give consumers choice, and that outdated, sprawl-creating dimensional requirements and unpredictable, expensive regulatory and permitting processes take away those freedoms from the builders. Most of us do not question the right of towns and cities to do some regulation of land uses. We shouldn't have slaughterhouses next to elementary schools and in the middle of residential neighborhoods, but the status quo has gotten us into the situation that we're in, and a rebalancing is necessary. Senate Bill 84 provides opportunity, and I want to reference Senator Murphy's comments on how density is good for the environment. It provides the opportunity for municipalities to set aside up to half of their residentially zoned land for larger lot sizes, and maybe that's, historically rural communities. That is okay, but land that is zoned as medium or high density residential, Senate Bill 84 puts reasonable limits on how large a lot can be required. That simple choice will give the builders the freedom to offer consumers choice. It'd be good for them, and it'd be good for all of us, and it'd be good for those communities. I just want to address implementation, which I imagine will be one of the concerns that's raised around this bill. I serve on my planning board with a lot of wonderful neighbors and volunteers, and our zoning ordinance, just like probably every other one, has a table of dimensional requirements. And so there is work involved in changing zoning requirements, but changing the numbers in a table of dimensional requirements is not a terribly heavy lift. And so I would propose that this is not the most onerous requirement, that municipalities update those dimensional requirements to reflect current standards in science, and again, just to rebalance in light of the serious need for housing. This is a really important and really powerful bill. I care about the work that we do at New Hampshire Housing, but I care much more for the people we serve and the many people who figure out my email address or phone number on a weekly basis and call or email me and beg me for help because they are losing their housing and facing a rent increase of $400 or something like this. I believe this bill will make their lives better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayberry, you're next.
Hello, once again.
Good morning again.
I'm Matt Mayberry, CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. One of the reasons why you've seen the home builders come forward with all these pieces of legislation is that we're sick of talking about the need for housing. We've done all the town hall meetings, we've done the kumbaya, we need housing, we need housing. Well, let's do something about it. Let's stop talking about it. Let's actually go get it done. So that's why we're bringing forward some of these ideas. Some of them you may like, some of you may not like, but we're going to bring it forward and we're going to keep pushing this issue. We're done talking. This issue right here, I don't understand why it has a fiscal note attached to it, because when I served on the Dover City Council for 7 years, I rezoned an entire city and it didn't cost any money. That we could identify, it says determining what defines a majority of land zone for residential use. It's already done. Your town has already decided residential, industrial, commercial, retail, done. So I don't understand why it's on there. Assessing if water and sewer systems are adequate capacities. I understand a sewer system, but for the majority of this, and this proposal does not waive DES requirements. You still have to have your water tests. You still have to have the soils to support septic systems. When we flip back to the HOPE Act, the Municipal Association talked about the infrastructure. It's not enough land to put a septic system on. It's called a shared system. We've done that before. You've seen that before. Island in the middle, that's where the leach field is, and it pumps in. Happens every day. I've been a realtor for 35 years, seen it. So I don't understand why this has a fiscal note attached to it, but that's greater powers that be. This creates, for lots without municipal or city water, sewer, the lot size maximum is 1.5 acres. Pretty good. The city of Keene in 2023, in their low-density rural district, went from 5 acres to 2 acres. The sky did not fall. The city did not collapse. But they opened up opportunities to provide housing for those who need it the most. I'm not locked into 1.5 acres. If the committee says we'd like to have 2 acres, fine. But do please know that the median lot size in the state of New Hampshire is just over 1 acre across our entire state. We have quite a few outliers who said, we want 5 acres. Well, they're the ones who are shoving people out of their towns. But yet often, they're the ones that demand the most support and the most housing. I'm going to kind of stop talking about it because we're done talking about it.
Okay.
It's 1.5 if without it. If you don't have water and sewer, it's an acre if it does, and it gets down to as much as a half an acre. We need housing. Please make the hard decisions. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayberry.
I'll stop.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Brody, you're back up.
Again, my name is Brody Deshays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. I appreciate the committee letting me speak today. The Municipal Association, as we have historically have been, are opposed to the state mandating minimum lot sizes like SB 84. And if you'll see in Section 5 of the bill, it says nothing in the section shall override or supersede applicable municipal zoning regulations unrelated to minimum lot sizes. And our concern is that there are regulations where communities need to take into account dimensional variables and things like slope, wetlands, and unsuitable soils and ledge. This would mandate minimum lot sizes on land that cannot be developed. There are some places in our state, there are some municipalities where they have larger lot sizes in some sections of their communities because of the soil type, because of the terrain. It's just a natural geographical fact. By getting rid of the municipality's right to regulate these things, you would have issues that would create health, welfare, safety, or environmental issues. So we hear the points that we heard before about the state approving a septic and a well, but still there are communities that reserve the right and should be able to determine the land in their backyard whether or not it's suitable for actual development. Another point that I'd like to highlight is municipal water and sewer does have an interest in controlling its cost and how fast development happens, because they pass those costs into their ratepayers and the people on those municipal water and sewer systems. So if all of a sudden you have a lot of development happen in a short period of time that puts a lot of stress on your infrastructure and requires an expansion of infrastructure of your water and sewer, well, ultimately the state is likely not going to be helping to pay for that. It's an unfunded mandate that will be passed on to the municipalities, and they'll have to squeeze their already squeezed ratepayers. We know people are struggling to pay their property taxes in the state. They're struggling with inflation, and yes, municipalities have costs that are increasing, and that includes their water and sewer systems. Labor cost is impacted by that, and having more people on a water and sewer system requires more people to administer to it and requires more infrastructure to be updated sooner. Last and final point is that it takes away local control and the voters' rights to approve lot sizes. We have seen municipalities in this state, they have made amendments to their zoning and their planning ordinances. We are seeing communities that are taking advantage of state funding, for example, Farmington, Portsmouth, and several other communities that are taking advantage of these funds to grow their infrastructure, because you need the infrastructure capacity and you need that local control, so then you can determine what's best to grow, what areas do you have the ability to provide that capacity for your infrastructure. And so we're seeing the state be proactive, we're seeing municipalities be proactive. It might not be proactive enough for the developers, but for many of these communities, they are taking action, they are working with folks, and we're working with them to interpret those laws and help access those funds, as are many of you on this committee. So we appreciate the efforts and the state providing that funding for infrastructure, but one size fits all mandates that overrules the votes of the legislative bodies, the voters of the municipalities. It's not going to always create the intended consequence that everyone thinks that we'll all of a sudden have housing, because without that infrastructure, you can't build the housing. And I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I just have a quick one. I often hear, oh, well, we're going to have all these expenses around this, that, and the other if this new housing comes in. Isn't it reasonable to expect that the additional property tax revenue will more than offset those increased expenses? And if not, why not?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. It really depends on who moves into the home. I mean, if all of a sudden you have a four-person family with 2 kids move into the community, well, the average cost of educating a child in this state is about $20,000. Even some of our more property wealthy communities and even some of our more expensive properties in those communities, it's not going to offset those education costs. Now, that's separate to the municipalities. There are impact fees. Those are one time. Obviously, municipalities get to determine what that money goes towards. Usually goes towards education. It doesn't usually go towards the infrastructure in a municipality. So if they're on water or sewer, they're utilizing roads or other things, I mean, you're going to see more people driving on local roads. You're going to see more people utilizing local infrastructure. And again, it's really dependent case by case. It's kind of tough, but usually municipalities, they see an increase of cost.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, Jim Michaud is back again.
Thank you, Senator and committee members. Again, my name is Jim Michaud. I'm the town assessor for the town of Hudson. I am neutral on this bill. When I started looking at this, and I said, be careful what we wish for. So under RSA 75:8-2C, revised inventory, municipalities, their assessing officials are required to take into account zoning changes when they're valuing property. So this would be true whether a municipality was lowering lot sizes or the state of New Hampshire was lowering lot sizes. So for April 1 of 2026, there might be a lot more potential value in people's land that they didn't have on April 1st, 2025. So while they didn't go through a subdivision process, it stands to reason if they have that land area and if they already have met the road frontage and all the other slope characteristics and site distances, that property has more value. Municipalities have a responsibility to assess that extra value. With that extra value comes extra taxes. People might not appreciate that. I don't know that, this has been contemplated in this bill, but that's kind of a, it's great. We're enabling folks to have more market value for their property, but there's also another side of it, right? And that's our requirements under the RSAs as assessing officials. Beyond that, if I'm an elderly property owner or I'm disabled and I get a means tested exemption that looks at income and assets, if I have additional lot value and that's a countable asset, that may or may not impact my ability to receive my elderly or disabled tax exemption in the future. Lastly, just a technical point, in the bill, it talks about properties that are serviced by water or properties that are serviced by sewer. So if I have a property, water line runs by me, the sewer line runs by me, but I'm not hooked up, I may pay a betterment assessment, but I'm not serviced. So I'm not sure if there's any desire to amend that part so that those folks get picked up within this. And I also don't see anything in here that talks about affordable housing or workforce housing or any means testing. So, there's nothing prohibiting a McMansion being built on a small quarter-acre lot. Matter of fact, we do see them. So that's just, one of those things where we want to make sure if we want to provide affordable and workforce housing, maybe we should put some curbs on these that actually call for that. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, appreciate you making the trip up today.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor from Housing Action New Hampshire.
Thank you, Chairman Ennis and members of the committee and Senator Murphy for bringing this bill forward. As I stated in previous testimony, I'm Nick Taylor. I'm the Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We advocate for policies that increase access to housing, and our members are developers, property managers, homeless shelters, landlords, lenders, and more. We are here in support of this bill. We've talked about the housing shortage, and so we won't go back into detail about that, but a few extra points I think are particularly relevant here. One that Senator Murphy eloquently stated, this is a policy decision that we have made to make starter homes and homes that are available for downsizing impossible. That is a policy decision that we have regulated essentially out of existence in many cases. An analysis of the New Hampshire Zoning Atlas found that only 15% of buildable land that would allow for smaller single-family homes under an acre. So we really have developed regulation that does not allow this to move forward. There are really thoughtful, I think, considerations in this bill around the health and safety protections around infrastructure and wastewater capacity. We've heard some of the fiscal concerns. I think those are addressed in that language about if a municipality was at capacity on their wastewater or sewer. We've also seen from New Hampshire Housing and the New Hampshire Association of Realtors multiple studies that have debunked the school children myth around smaller lot sizes. So we don't believe that is a concern either. And we do think this is, again, very thoughtfully crafted with, even in areas where there's not water and sewer, almost the majority of land could still be untouched by this regulation, allowing for rural zones to continue to exist in many New Hampshire communities, which is, I think, totally acceptable and fine with us. The one note is on Section 5, we would encourage the committee to think about whether there is additional language that could address whether if you shrunk the lot size, are there setback considerations that must be addressed? And so, could there be language around, except in cases where dimensional regulations would result in a unbuildable lot. So if you shrank it down to 100 by 200, but you still maintained those 50-foot setbacks, you would essentially be rendering something unbuildable that could be done locally, that could be included here, but wanted to raise that for the committee as well. But again, we are in strong support of this. We think this will make a real difference for our workforce housing and welcoming New Hampshire.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Chris Evans. Good morning, Mr. Evans.
Greetings all. Thank you for all your work on these bills. I hope I can be as eloquent speaking as my preceding people here.
If you could state your name and organization for the record, that'd be great.
That's okay. I am Chris Evans. I am a real estate broker for about 44 years. I've developed property. I've worked with several builders and developers. I'm usually on the other side of the planning board table, but I am now on my planning board. So I have a unique extra perspective in my world. I do support this bill. I agree with almost everything that was said before me. We do already have a Department of Environmental Services that monitors wells and septics across the entire state. And it seems to me that a lot of the towns, particularly my town, is usurping the usage of this statewide resource. I'm sure DES costs a lot of money to run, and they're full of engineers and designers and people that have experience, for example, in approving septic designs, compared to some people on a town zoning board that might be a nurse, a retired person, somebody with very little experience in planning and, you know, potentially even having their own personal agenda. So we already have DES. We should put that fully to use. We should have soil-based and engineering and designs and not abstract town considerations for lot sizes, 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres. There's a lot of waste of land going on out there with that. There should be a repeal of all towns' powers to override DES. DES is already there. You know, some of the things, for example, our town has larger setbacks for septic systems. There's absolutely no proof of why that should exist. Some towns have larger well radiuses. Again, just arbitrary things that are picked up by the towns. So I think we should not waste our land resources. In my town, just the land that's cut off a 2-acre lot before you can even start looking at the lot is a 50-foot perimeter of the whole lot. It's almost 1.25 acres of 2 acres. That's perfectly good land thrown away. In some towns, that's 5 houses. I'm sorry if I'm going to go a little long here. Bittersweet and zoning. The bittersweet vine was introduced to our state, and it grows underneath roots and stumps and trees and rocks, and there's no poisons to kill it. It spreads by seeds. It's the same as zoning. Zoning has started as a 15 to 20 page document and has now evolved to over 100 pages in many towns, and some even more, plus subdivision regs, plus site plan regs, all adopted by the towns. There's no standardization at all. Every town has a different type of zoning and zoning ordinances. It's like going on a scavenger hunt to find all the things that are going to stop your development, honestly. I have heard comments from town planners when I mentioned affordable housing, and the literal term right out of the planner's mouth was, we don't want that crap, he used another word, in our town. And another comment I heard was, well, we don't want to support, and this is, I can't even believe people say these things, we don't want to support welfare mothers with 6 kids and crackheads with our tax dollars. This is town people. So problems are that many town zoning ordinances are very interpretive, and there's a lot of elements, like if you said, hey, I want to present affordable housing, the town could simply say, well, that's not within the character of our town because we don't have any, so therefore we deny it. And developers are spending tens of thousands of dollars and months to come up with plans to design. Changing the zoning ordinances will be a giant, huge, ridiculous process. I say that because I am on my town and I am trying to make housing positive changes, and I got squished, absolutely squished, and voted down with simple ideas to lower our setbacks and, you know, bring more housing in, and they're all about the trees. Towns will fight, the municipal association will fight. The DES already has provisions for slopes, ledge, wetlands, which towns put their own interpretations of those. So that shouldn't be a problem. That should be already part of what DES looks at. They look at if a lot is all ledge, then you have to build your septic above that. That's already built into the DES agenda. There's mention about people struggling to pay taxes. I'd like to mention that $12 million of new properties in our town cause our tax rate to go down 4.6%, which was great. I'm there to fight for lower taxes. That's part of my personal agenda being on my planning board. Other factors here, cost, time, enactment, implementation of this. How can we get more affordable housing quicker? right now, if you went to a town to change the zoning, you would have to put it before the planning board. They would have to, in our town, some towns are different, put it before the planning board. They would have to work on the wording, hold open hearings, and then send it to the town lawyer for review, and then in March of each given year, vote on the amendment. If we put this bill out there to say towns must change their zoning, it's gonna be a year minimum before towns can change their zoning, and that's not helping our housing crisis now. So a couple ideas. Oh, just one other quick thought. Road frontage is a problem right now to build. Our latest road, we have an approved subdivision in Manchester, and the cost is $1,433 per foot, which, you know, puts the lots at about $200,000 just for the infrastructure, never mind the actual cost of the land. The previous subdivision right next to this was 31 months for approval, so there's a time factor to how fast these things get approved. And then there's also setbacks. How big of a house can you put on a lot? If you have a smaller lot, you may have smaller houses, and again, that might help with the pricing. To get affordable housing, we need higher density and we need more supply. Supply and demand is a simple thing. So I had made some I looked at this bill very carefully, and I made some additions to it. Those additions, and I'll pass this in if that's appropriate with my scribbles on it. Those additions were that the bill adds setbacks to lots, because you might have an 1.5 acre lot required across the state. However, if the town has 250 or 300 feet of frontage and that road costs $1,000 or $1,400 per foot, that will not create an affordable housing situation. So there should be setbacks and frontage attached to this. I have considered a general house of colonial, like a 36-foot colonial with a 24-foot garage, about 72 feet wide, I believe, and then 25-foot setbacks on either side, come up with 125 foot of frontage, not 250 or 300 feet of frontage. That should be added to this bill, because towns will inadvertently squash affordable lot sizes by making stronger frontage requirements. Setbacks should also be uniform across the state. Our town has 50-foot setbacks. Again, in Manchester, you could build a house on a 50-foot lot. There should be an emergency invocation of this statewide law. Instead of having the towns, you know, saying, hey, you got to change your zoning and waiting a year for that to happen, or maybe more, this policy should be adapted as an emergency statewide matter so that it is enacted today. Applicants should have an option to apply to statewide zoning or town zoning as they see fit for any given town. There should be soil-based land conditions instead of and standardized zoning for across the state instead of arbitrary town sizes. So I have added in just a couple other provisions that, you know, lots need to be on class 4 roads. Class 5 roads are better. That towns can't invoke their temporary moratorium limitations on building and the growth management ordinances to circumvent this. That there will be frontage requirements added to this, these lot sizes. There will be setback requirements to these lot sizes. There's section 4 says potential for development, and I added the word redevelopment. In other words, a subdivision that was approved last year could be redone. And lastly, because towns are apt to put conditions on these approvals and make it harder for this, if this is invoked as a statewide law, that the towns have to follow today or when it's passed, not when they get around to changing and, you know, figuring out their lot size and what area of town they want to put their housing in, and that's going to take a long time in itself. That we should have this an appeal process similar to the workforce housing process, whereby the applicant can appeal decisions of the town, particularly if they're arbitrary or interpretive. And that the burden of proof will be on the town to say this zoning regulation or interpretive thing is backed by certain facts and not detail. So we need land-based factual development in the state, not arbitrary town zoning. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 84? All right, seeing none, appreciate that. There are two folks who signed up in support of the bill but chose not to speak, and I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 84. All right. Next up, we will have Senator Murphy again with Senate Bill 91 in just a minute or so. While we're here and with a moment, if you're here for executive committee, the intention is for that to happen after this bill is heard. Two of our colleagues had to be elsewhere for about 20 minutes, so the timing should be about right. We'll take a brief recess should we finish with this one before they return. But we will exec 4 or 5 bills probably once we're done with Senate Bill 91. So I'd like to re-welcome Senator Murphy. So please tell us a little bit about this wonderful bill of yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Murphy, representing the people of District 16. I'll return to the usual 90-second introduction now.
Thank you for that.
So, tax rates are uniform across jurisdictions, but commercial properties often taxed at a higher value than residential property, residential zone property. Current law, RSA 75:11, allows the owner of a residential property inside of industrial commercial zone to every single year apply for a special appraisal of the residence, therefore resulting in lower taxes. And what this bill does essentially say, you don't need to do it every year. You need to do it once. And then it's just going to be assumed that it's the same going forward until use changes, and it's up to the town to catch that. So it's a pretty simple bill, just makes it easier for everybody.
Very simple. All right, any questions? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Michaud from Hudson, who came for Housing Day, welcome back.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, committee members. Jim Michaud for the record, Town Assessor in Hudson. And this one actually has a lot to do with assessing, right? As opposed to the others, which were sometimes tertiary. So it's a one-page form the person needs to fill out. That's it. I mean, there's a lot of one-page forms that are really easy to fill out. The municipality is required to send this form to them each year. In Hudson, we do that each year. When they don't respond, we send it again. When they don't respond, we do a certified mail. And the form is the only really proof we have, say, on a no trespassing property, right? So they're signing a form on a penalty of perjury that this is their single-family residence. It can only be on a single-family residence. And they have to be a resident of it. I just don't see that this is a heavy lift. But if the senators want to feel that this law should be changed, maybe we can make it a local option on an annual requirement, like we do with the elderly and disabled tax exemptions. Communities can choose to annually requalify them, but they have to do it once within every 5 years, according to the DRA's assessment review process. You could make this something similar. Leave it up to the governing body if they feel that this is worthwhile to do each year, or if they want to do it just once every 5 years. This is really intended to make sure that that no one's gaming the system, right? That they're not, they actually don't live there. They're actually using it commercially. Check the Secretary of State's website, and they have a business registered there. We just want to make sure that the special appraisal that values the property under the market value, right? This is a special appraisal. It was commercial industrial on South Willow Street, but they're living in it. They're getting a far lower assessment. And the purpose of that is to make sure they don't get value zoned out of their property. That's a worthy public purpose. But I don't think a one-page form is really that much of a heavy lift. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Appreciate it very much. You want to speak?
Yes.
You did, but you didn't. Yeah, you did. You said you'd speak, and I'm sorry. I need more coffee or something. All right, Mr. Deshay.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to the committee for letting me speak. The New Hampshire Municipal Association is opposed to this bill, and the reasoning is some of the things that you heard from the previous testimony from Mr. Michaud of Hudson. Obviously, because it moves the onus of verifying residential property in a commercial zone from the property owner and the assessor's office to just the assessor's office. That would be an increase in administrative costs. If you think of a city like Manchester, by Queen City Ave, you have those residential neighborhoods that kind of by the Home Depot and everything. That would be, in some cases, a Herculean task, depending if you have a private or a public assessing office and depending on the circumstance. And obviously, you know, these communities want to make sure that they're properly assessing these properties. If someone all of a sudden is using, you know, a commercial property in that commercial zone, the amount of assessed value is going to go up a fair amount. And they also don't want to overtax folks who are in using a property in a commercial zone residentially. You know, we don't want to tax these people out of their homes. So having that yearly verification and having it be a collaborative process and a simple letter is helpful. I'll also point out reporting requirements on land use for assessing purposes is very usual in our state. It's like the charitable or the religious use where there are A12s and A9 forms where yearly around, you know, April, those forms are submitted to the assessing office. The assessor reviews them. And it also helps inform the assessor about what properties they're going to go to and verify. They might meet with a board of directors. In this case, an assessor might go to a property and just double check with the residential homeowner if they haven't received a letter back yet and everything. But they might have received letters back and they can just drive by and verify, yep, that's a house, yep, clearly being used for a residential use. And again, we also have that concern with the perjury requirement and getting rid of that. We want to make sure people are actually reporting accurately and that there's a requirement that they do report accurately to the cities and the municipalities of the state. And so for those reasons we're opposed, we think the current system actually works very well and that the assessors are doing their due diligence to get those letters out to the property owners. And I'll take any questions if there are
Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, appreciate
you.
it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 91? All right. No one else signed up either in opposition, support, or with neutrality, so I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 91. And we will go into recess for 15 minutes and recoup and go into executive session. We are in recess. All right, I'm gonna call the Commerce Committee out of recess. And the first thing I will note is that the following bills are being referred to the Subcommittee on Housing. Senate Bill 27, Senate Bill 55, Senate Bill 78, Senate Bill 81, 82, 84, and Senate Bill 91. Action on those will be set by Senator Murphy, who runs that particular subcommittee. So, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
I don't even know.
Yeah, I just.
I believe Senator Perkins spoke with you. That's great, it's brand new. It's the first notice I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to go into executive session. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in executive session. And I'd like to take a look at 4 bills that we could move along today, I hope. The first is Senate Bill 24, which is the wine tasting bill. As I recall, there weren't any real objections to that. The Liquor Commission is comfortable with it. And it provides an educational opportunity for students in 2 ways. One is to learn about alcoholic beverages and the intricacies of them, which helps our hospitality industry along. And it also provides an educational opportunity for students to learn from our own Liquor Commission during 1 or 2 class periods about safe use, identifying people who are intoxicated and avoiding serving them, and so on. And in our state, folks from 18 to 20 can actually serve alcohol. They can be bartenders. They can do all sorts of things with it. And this gives them an opportunity to learn a little more about it and be better at what they do, which benefits our hospitality industry. So is there discussion on this particular bill? Senator Sharp?
Yes, I would like to make a motion for a law to pass so that we can go
Thank
into
you.
discussion. And after.
second that.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I was not in support of this last time, but I want to commend Senator Ennis. He worked really hard to make this a very good bill, and I see high hopes for the progress of it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right, I'm going to move consent.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, very good. Thank you. Next up will be Senate Bill. Oh, I will take this one out, should that be necessary. Thank you, Aaron, I appreciate that. Second up is Senate Bill 50, which has to do with animal boarding. And this particular bill came to us from Senator Ward, and I will make a motion about to pass.
I will.
Okay, we have a second. Motion and a second. Is there discussion? All right. Yes, Senator Murphy.
I just want to note that I'm going to be a very quiet, respectful no on this.
Okay.
I feel very strongly and empathize deeply with those people that spoke that lost their animals. But I think the answer is usually less regulation, not more regulation. In this case, if there were contracts in place, I think that a lot of this might have been avoided. I also don't know what regulation we're going to pass or consider that would prevent this from happening again. In the case of the gentleman whose dog, he says the place probably killed his animal and hid the body. The lady, according to him, the person who was holding the dog, says the dog ran away. What regulation are we going to possibly consider that would solve that problem? So I'm prepared to be in the minority on this, and
Okay.
I'm not going to argue it too much. I just want to explain why I'm voting no.
All right, thank you. Senator Richard.
I would just like to point out that we're not making a legislation now. It's a study committee to see how they can best improve in the process. And I think that that's where you find solutions. So I just want to add that.
Okay, thank you for that. Senator McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a tragic situation. We all treat our pets like family. I too don't think more regulation is necessarily the answer here. I think this dog may have been sold in this particular case. In respect to our dearly departed Senator Roberge. Some of you may remember Sheila Roberge, one of Senator Ricciardi's predecessors from Bedford, back when Bedford was in the district with Merrimack. I respect her work, all the work she did for animal advocacy, seatbelts for pets and seatbelts for dogs in the back of pickup trucks and all of those different things. We created a lot of regulations, but we've also, the more regulations we create, the less individual responsibility there is. And personally, for my dogs from 8 weeks to 12 years and 8 weeks to 22 year or to 13 years, different sets of dogs. I've always brought those dogs under contract to the same reliable kennel and personally inspected the facilities. And now, when I'm ready to get 2 more puppies, which is probably pretty soon, I'll probably utilize a facility that has webcams 7x24, which are readily available. So I think those types of things are the answer, and I don't think we should regulate those. I don't think we should legislate those. So I'm also, after those lengthy comments, sorry, I'm also a quiet no on this.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any further comments? All right, we have a motion of ought to pass with a second, and I'm going to ask, all in favor of the ought to pass motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so we're at 4-2 on that one. All right. Would you like to take that out, Senator Ricciardi?
I'd love to.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, we have Senate Bill 52. 52 is a bill that we received from me. And this one we heard it's really cleaning up a lot of things, and there was no opposition. There was broad support for this one. It seems to me that a motion of ought to pass, which I will make, makes sense.
Second.
We have a second. Is there discussion?
A comment. It has taken one part of a very comprehensive statute and substituted the word fiduciary for trustee,
Correct.
while the very same person in the rest of the statute is called a trustee. And I think,
I see.
although we will certainly, I'm in favor of this, somebody needs to take a comprehensive look at that statute.
I
for the next session.
appreciate that comment. So the statute needs to be consistent with this bill. I agree. Okay, we can do that. Okay, so we have a motion with a second. All in favor of ought to pass? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I will move consent. Do we have a
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. And I will take that one out since it's mine.
Makes sense.
Yes, Senate Bill 67 is the next one we've got. And 67 is from Senator McHugh. Senator, would you like to make a motion on this one?
I'll move on to pass.
I will second. We have a second from Senator Fenton. All right, discussion on this one. All right, seeing none, motion is on the floor with a second. All in favor of the ought to pass motion? Aye. Any opposed?
Move consent.
We have a move consent from Senator Fenton with a second from Senator Murphy. All in favor of consent? Aye. Any opposed? All right, and it is on consent. Senator McHugh, would you take that one out for us, please? All right, is there anything further while we're in executive session? Yes, Senator Ricciardi.
I know you moved Senate Bill 55 to the housing.
Yes.
Would it still be okay to give some commentary on it?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm looking out to, I did some homework on it,
Yeah,
okay?
I
And
had
so-
some calls too.
Okay, so if everybody will indulge me in patience, so I can read my homework,
Okay.
so it can go into the record so that they'll have better decision-making process over in housing. So, after reading Senate Bill 55, I'm concerned that there's no fiscal note attached, and as a former Conservation Commission member, I would be curious to know how many projects resulting with 20 or more residential units were built in the last 4 years as a result of removing land from current use. The primary goal of LUCT is to discourage rapid unplanned sprawl that does not have infrastructure to support development by making a one-time, more financially financial investment in the community to convert rural land into developed areas, thereby potentially encouraging more compact development patterns, which uses economics of scale to maximize infrastructure investments by minimizing the graphic requiring the project's service area, therefore making costs for services more affordable and saving taxpayer funds. Basically, why cities become cities and why land value capture encourages building up before building out. Further, I don't see any tie to affordable or workforce or elderly housing being a requirement of this bill. If 20 luxury units result in a desirable tourist location like our beautiful ski towns and lake towns or seacoast, how do we ensure this loss of revenue, which under current law goes to the conservation fund or the town's general fund to reduce taxes, will result in permanent residents rather than second homeowners? My biggest concern is that this bill either takes money away from local taxpayers that is reported as revenues and works to reduce the tax rate for all residents, or overrides a local option decided by the voters town by town as how to best use the land use change tax collected and places in conservation funds. It can be any percentage or up to the dollar amount and provides a great tax break to a select type of development. The town voters, the same voters who elected me to be here, decide this. And this bill, the way it's written until 2031, takes their voice away. A sample warrant article would read, shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 79-A:25 to account for revenues received from the land use change tax in a fund separate from the general fund, and any surplus remaining in the land use change tax fund shall not be part of the general fund until such time as the legislative body shall have the opportunity at an annual meeting. Why not just make this bill, I like to look for compromise, a local option? We simply don't know what land will come up for sale, how many developments that are eligible under this policy will result, and what the impact will be town by town. I went and looked at the DRA report, and according to the recent report, Bedford, my hometown, collected over $587,000 that the voters decided to place in our conservation fund. And I tried to pick some of the towns of our members sitting here, but for example, Henniker, almost 66,000, Candia, 85,000, Littleton, over 100,000, Laconia, over 201,000. So do we know how much tax relief or funding for conservation projects will this mandate on voters? It will eliminate if this bill passes as written. The tax is intended to recognize that untouched open space will now be developed and will have costs for municipal services attached. And while it will create new taxable property, it is not new revenue because in our tax system, the local voter adopter budget is simply redistributed amongst more property taxpayers. But demand for service will increase. I see it every year in Bedford in more emergencies, transfer station activity, and wear and tear on the roads. I also want to recognize that in 2022, our BEA reported that New Hampshire issued multifamily homes at a 40.6% increase from the previous year. That's progress without mandates. And I'm not going to read any more of it, but I just want to say that I'd like to see the bill amended to make it a local decision and not for the state to override what the voters in each community have already decided for themselves as unknown impacts for the next 6 years, along with my constituents voicing opposition, does not allow me to support the bill as written. Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yes, comment, Senator.
Just, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You and I had spoken about this. I just want to confirm. So these bills that were referred to the Housing Subcommittee are they're determining a decision on that and then giving us a recommendation and we are executing these bills.
That's correct. Yes, yeah. We had the initial hearing and then it'll move over there, make sure we got everything right, and then come back to us for final action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But we will be voting on it.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that the ultimate decision lies with this committee. Okay. All right. Anything further? All right. Do we have a motion to come out of executive? We're out. Wait, I didn't come out yet. Where's my coffee? All right, so do we have a motion to come out of executive committee?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. I will now adjourn the Committee on Commerce until next week. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Aaron, let me go to it.
We were just talking about it.